Hello, everyone, and welcome to the TDWI webinar program. I'm Andrew Miller, and I'll be your moderator. For today's program, we're going to talk about architecting a modern Martech stack for speed, scale, and AI readiness. And our sponsor today is Uniphore. For our presentations today, we'll hear first from Donald Farmer with TDWI. And after Donald speaks, we'll be joined by Joe Polikal with Uniphore and Harsha Krotapalli with DocuSign for a panel discussion. Before I turn over the time to our speakers, please allow me to go over a few basics. Today's webinar will be about an hour long, and at the end of their presentations, our speakers will host a question and answer period. So if at any time during these presentations you'd like to submit a question, just use the Ask a Question area on your screen to type in your question. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, you can click on the Technical FAQs area and you'll receive technical assistance. And if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, you can locate the resource window to download the PDF. Lastly, we are recording today's event and we'll be emailing you a link to an archived version so you can view the presentation again later if you choose, or you can share with a colleague. Again, today we're going to be discussing architecting a modern Martech stack for speed, scale, and AI readiness. And our first speaker is Donald Farmer. He's a research fellow at TDWI and is an internationally respected speaker and writer with over 30 years of experience in data management and analytics. He advises investors, software vendors, and enterprises on data and analytics strategy. And Donald has led teams at Microsoft and Click, building some of the most important and innovative analytics platforms on the market. With that, please welcome Donald, and I will hand it over to you now.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is such a great topic to be talking about today. Recently I was at an AI training event, and these questions came up all the time. Exactly these three: speed, scale, and readiness were top of mind for everyone. So I think this is a very important topic, and it actually is very important when it comes to marketing and marketing technology. Martech, from TDWI research, is one of the top 6 use cases for AI. Now you might think, well, 6 is quite a lot, but actually, if you consider that includes generating content and generating code and implementing chatbots, you can see that actually the use of AI in marketing, not just for generating content, but for analyzing and understanding our marketing, the whole scope of marketing technology is actually really critical. But one thing that also comes up all the time in our conversations is that there's real challenges in marketing technology today. There have been a lot of, in the past, monolithic platforms, which are designed for very specific purposes, and sometimes they're very vertical in the case of industrial platforms, and sometimes they're quite horizontal in the case of, say, financial or marketing platforms. But in all cases, they tend to create those data silos where the data is now isolated in a legacy system. And as a result, there are typically pretty slow response times, but it also means that people have to extract data from these systems in order to do work with them. And that batch processing of extracting data really gets in the way of doing the real time work that has become so important to agile and responsive marketing technology today for personalization. The architecture not only is kind of slow and unresponsive, but that rigidity of having everything in a single stack or having everything in a data silo really limits the ability to experiment and to turn over new ideas rapidly. And also the difficulty of integrating that data with all the other sources that we have. And we shouldn't, be naive about this. There are many other sources of data in the enterprise. The integration of that just adds more and more complexity. And every time there's a new tool added, that adds more integration complexity. So there's some real challenges here, and legacy systems can't keep pace with the rate of change in the business. And customers also face a new reality, which I think is important. Our customers expect a consistent experience with you, but they expect that experience across numerous touch points. So, for example, customer support. And when they're on your online shop, for example, if they're in e-commerce and they're on your online store, they expect the experience of the online store and any customer support they need to be consistent. And if they want to go and manage their account, then that's also meant to be a consistent process. And that consistency becomes very important for customers, especially across these omni-channel experiences. They expect real-time context which is to say that they expect your system to be responsive to the way they're behaving on the system. And we know that that context drives higher conversion rates. We want recommendations, and that's now standard. Every e-commerce application for sure, but every marketing application involves recommendation nowadays. And we also need, as marketers, to be able to do cross-channel attribution, which means that we need a customer profile that goes across channels so that when customer activity takes place, we are able to integrate all that and attribute that customer activity across all the different channels where they may be active. So customer reality, if you like, is changing as well as the enterprise and legacy stacks that we've used. So what is really the problem here? What are the limitations of legacy that make it difficult to go forward? Well, one thing that becomes very clear, again, from TDWI research that we've done, and we do quite a lot of this quantitative research, is that the primary motivation for updating the data stack for 45% of the companies we talk to is to enable modern analytics. So clearly people are wanting the modern analytic frameworks. And that includes not just AI, which is of course top of mind for people just now, but the high performance, the high scale, the elastic capabilities of dealing with speed and scale, and also the ability to do machine learning, which of course you can think of as being related to AI, but predictive analytics in many ways is nowadays its own practice. And, the legacy applications tend to hit the wall here. They hit a wall of performance. They're locked into vendor ecosystems. The data warehouse, which was supposed to be an enabling function, is increasingly becoming a bottleneck when we want to, say, have a complex or real-time workflow like activating a customer. The data warehouse can become a bottleneck there because it's actually designed for batch processing. It's designed as a system of record rather than an interactive, responsive real-time system. If you have manual processes, and we all have manual processes, then they can delay, especially the kind of integrated process like a campaign launch where you're bringing data from many different data sources, which may be in themselves very diverse, including things like unstructured sources. Those manual processes can be really slow. And then we have gaps in governance as well as a result of these silos and these processes. Pardon me. And those gaps in governance are really important because increasingly in marketing, we can be concerned with compliance and data quality issues, given the rise of data privacy legislation around the world. So there are some real limits here. These are not just limitations of practice, they're technical limitations as well to the legacy applications. Increasingly, people are shifting to what's called composable architecture, an API-first ecosystem, as opposed to, say, a batch processing system. And so now we have best-of-breed tools, which can communicate through APIs, and these can replace the monolithic suites of single applications. The APIs enable the rapid integration. The rapid integration enables the customization, personalization. A microservices architecture supports that speed and scale that is so important. And cloud native platforms mean that you can manage these applications without the infrastructure of a heavyweight legacy application, without that footprint on your own premises, which every time you add to that footprint is a process that needs to be managed and increases the administration that you're wanting. And when we think about this architecture, I should point out that our research also shows that having a company-wide data architecture in place for AI is a priority for people, but about 50% of the people we talk to say they either disagree or strongly disagree that they're ready for this. AI readiness simply isn't there, and it's nearly always this architectural shift that is necessary that leaves them behind in AI readiness. And that's really, really an issue. People are struggling. 36% say they have a foundation that may be suitable for AI, but that's only 36 compared to the 80% who want to be doing AI. And they're struggling with hybrid deployments. They're still planning deployments. About 40% of customers either haven't built anything or are still in the planning stage. So this shift is actually very important. People want to do it, but most people are struggling with this in one way or another. Another question that comes up a lot is real time. And why is real time so important? One thing that's really critical is the sub-second response time of hyper personalization and being able to respond to very specific behavior that the customer is taking on your website in your online store, for example. And that's an event-driven architecture. It's not a batch-driven architecture. It has to be an event-driven architecture that responds, sub-second response times increasingly required. And that means that rather than these really heavy overnight batch processes, which depended on traditional ETL or ELT, where data is extracted in a batch, process, moved on, we're replacing that with streaming pipelines, which are much more adaptive, high performance, event driven. And then that enables you to have the real-time decisions which could power the personalization on your website or in your e-commerce store. So becomes very important. Everyone wants to move from a very traditional, a very solid, in some ways very reliable system. They want to move towards something which is much more adaptive and interactive. That requires not just changes in practice, but these architectural shifts. But you also want the reliability, the governance, the restartability of these systems as well. So we need to think about this, in a sense, go back to the basics and think of what is an AI first design principles. And, designing for AI, I think, is one of these kind of concepts where we have to build it in from the bricks. We have to start from day one. This is important to me. I mean, there's many working in enterprise software. I've always said that there are certain things that we have to think about from day one. For example, if you're going to do data migration, you have to think about that from day one. We have to build in security from day one, not something you can bolt on afterwards with any confidence. Increasingly, we have to think about AI first as being a design principle we build in from day one. So we want data quality frameworks because the quality of data is essential to the quality of AI. The old garbage in, garbage out kind of saying is still absolutely relevant today. But we're going to experiment. And we're going to experiment rapidly. And therefore, we need an extensible architecture where we can add new tools without creating new data silos. We do need governance systems. AI needs to be governed. It's a big issue for everyone. And we need feature stores, which are the ways in which we store the information in a form that AI can take advantage of it. We need real-time feature stores because we want to be able to move quickly to accelerate the development of models. A successful model will change the behavior of customers. That's why you're building the model. A successful model will change the behavior of customers, which means it has to be updated again. So you end up with this model development life cycle, which needs to be continuously updated, or at least rapidly updated. So these are, important design principles, and it's much easier to build those in at the beginning than it is to bolt them on at the end. And this is one of the reasons why people are increasingly looking to update their architecture for AI, to reimagine their architecture for AI, rather than just attaching AI to an existing architecture. Mostly that just won't work. It's not perfect. There are problems. There are roadblocks, of course. There are challenges in modernization, but many of those challenges aren't so much technical as organizational. Organizational alignment on understanding priorities and what does it mean to have a successful Martech stack in the age of AI. That's a human problem, but it's an important one. Yes, it's difficult to integrate systems. The integration complexity with your existing systems is something which has to be tackled as an architectural priority. It can be a roadblock, especially if legacy systems don't integrate easily with APIs. It's not insurmountable, but it is a specific challenge that we have to address. Data governance and security. It can be a challenge, especially if you're in a highly regulated industry like healthcare, or financial services. But at the same time, it's something we have to address, and we need a specific strategy for dealing with that. You can't just wing it. You have to build a strategy around that. And then because you're changing, because the whole point of implementing these architectures is to change the way you work, you need a good change management process across all the stakeholder groups, across everybody who is affected by this in order to be successful. How do you measure? I said that one of the problems here was that it's difficult to measure, or really sometimes difficult to agree on the measures for the impact of these modern marketing technologies. I've got four suggestions here, which I think are useful. One is the time to activation of a customer. You want to decrease that from weeks to onboard someone to just a matter of hours. The customer lifetime value should increase because you're personalizing the system better for them. You want to look at, in the back office, you want to look at your data quality scores. Your quality of your customer data should be improving as a result of these processes. And then you can also look at productivity, which is an important part of improving your profitability as well. But productivity for your marketing teams should increase because so much of the workflow, the very manual workflow in many cases, can be automated with modern technologies. So these are four metrics: the time to value, if you like, the time to activation, the lifetime value, the quality of your data, and the productivity of your team. Typically, people can agree on these four. There are very specific metrics within this that you might need to refine, but these four broad areas of metrics are very important. They're very measurable, and they're a great measure of success for your system. With that, I hope that gives you a kind of level setting of where we are in terms of our readiness for Martech. I think it, drawn some TDWI research to give you a sense of where quantitatively that fits in. And I'd love for Andrew now to take us forward into the next stage of the webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Donald. That was an excellent presentation there. Now it's time for our discussion. So please allow me to introduce our first guest speaker, Joe Pulikow with Uniphore. Joe is Director of Product Management at Uniphore, where he empowers enterprise business teams to deliver superior customer experiences by activating customer data while supporting technical teams in reclaiming control over data governance. With over 15 years in pre-sales and solution consulting across Martech, data integrity, and customer experience, he has held senior roles at Precisely, Pitney Bowes, leading Pitney Bowes, leading initiatives at 360 Customer View, Marketing Intelligence, and Data Governance. And our next guest speaker today is Harsha Krotapalli with DocuSign. Harsha has over 15 years of experience building and scaling marketing technology, data platforms, and growth systems at companies including Opendoor, LinkedIn, Macy's, and Oracle. At DocuSign, he leads product and engineering teams, modernizing marketing and customer platforms with a track record of taking ideas from concept to scale, creating systems that last, and equipping marketing and growth teams with the tools to drive measurable impact. Welcome to both Joe and Harsha, and with that, Joe, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. And thanks for that, really in detailed description of the market and the landscape. Donald, really appreciate it. So I wanted to start with making three big observations, right? And kind of ties back to what Donald was covering. So number one is when we think about the future of Martech, it is not just AI. Yes, AI is definitely part of it, but it's also aligning on the architecture that works for the business and then delivers value at each step. So that's one key thing to call out. Obviously, TDWI, other analysts have pointed out legacy stacks are siloed, monolithic, batch first mostly processing, and aren't necessarily keeping up with the demands of doing more with less. So that much is clear. But overall, how do we adapt to that set of emerging design principles is going to be very, very important. Organizations aren't necessarily asking for data and unification of data. All of that typically exists or need to be made available to businesses and business users. But what they're really asking is, how do I support changes that happen very quickly? How do I adapt? How do I support my architecture and make AI like a core component of it, but at the same time make sure that I'm able to trust it, govern it, scale it, make it explainable right from the get-go, not after the fact. The second thing I wanted to call out is, we've been in the space. Me particularly, I've been in the space for over a decade now, and when I started, there was a single owner or typically one team owned customer data. That's no longer the case. It's now a joint effort. There's product engineering, data teams, marketing, sales. They all kind of need to be part of the conversation. And this cross-functional model creates complexities. And this is the new normal we all have to operate out of, because one, data is used in specific ways in each of those departments, but also then you layer AI and that complexity just compounds multiple fold. And then the last thing to kind of call out is, yes, bringing data together, making sure our platform systems are AI ready is one thing, but then a lot of the organizations I work with, hundreds of our customers and prospects that I talk to, they have like a plethora of different tools. And so they constantly talk about, hey, what is the next step in modernizing my tech stack? What do I need to have? What can I remove? And how do I create synergies across the board? And so that is one of the major reasons that I'm super excited today talking with Harsha, because Harsha's living this day to day. And I know that speed, scale, and intelligence are like the big priority for him. So with that, Harsha, I wanted to maybe start off with when you first DocuSign, you've been there now a couple of years, when you first joined DocuSign, what did you see in the Martech landscape and the data landscape at DocuSign? What are the gaps that stood out for you right away? Let's start there, and then I have some follow-ups there. Oh, you're on mute, Harsha.
Never gets old. First of all, thank you for having me here. Job, so just get to your question. So it's been 2 years since I've joined DocuSign, and my initial observations when we looked at the Martech stack when we joined DocuSign, like anyone else, one, it was fragmented, which I think is like expected, like for most of the organizations. But what stood out for us was like a couple things. The data plumbing wasn't like keeping up. Marketing teams were not able to like move faster. Personalization at scale was like nearly impossible, and the architecture was not built for like extensibility, right? So we had like tons of like point-to-point integrations. We had like core services which were in the vendor's like pockets, so where we did not have like controls over like how data is being like governed, like monitored, etc. So yeah, so those were some of the problems, but the major gaps that stood out at the time were governance, speed, and ability to like activate data in a timely manner. So that were the big friction points at the time.
Got it. And I mean, that's a story that we often hear from enterprises, right? Similar to yours. And the difference between like, going faster and, potentially making sure that governance is in place, it's quite, it's sort of like a fine line to thread, right? So when you think about that, now that you identified, hey, here's what I'm seeing, here are the gaps, how did you start shaping that modernization of the tech stack?
Yeah, at the time, like we knew that like we just couldn't do like a big bang replacement and miraculously that would work, because that never works. The strategy was like, hey, let's set like long-term vision, but pick on areas where we could make like significant, like, quick impact. That means we had to like pick on some areas where we were struggling the most, like stabilizing our like lead workflows, like we being like a B2B organization. We want to reduce the latency in like campaign activations. And like, I think Donald spoke about it, like from weeks to like days, or to like hours in some cases. The third part was to be able to create like a trusted, like a source of truth for like the marketing data as much as we can. So those wins gave us like a credibility with like our stakeholders and our partners, and bought the space together. So we took that as a foundation, and we started like building the architecture from there on. And we had to be like super clear on things like, what does Martech stack mean for each one of our stakeholders? When I first started asking that questions, they started like relating Martech stack to like specific tools that they like use day to day. For someone, it was their email platform. For someone else, it was like ActionIQ. For someone else, it was their data warehouse. So from there, like what we thought about it, the Martech stack should be a collection of like capabilities, and we came up with like, these are the 9 capabilities that the Martech stack should be like supporting our users at scale. And then we started like mapping down like what are the different tools, like be it like homegrown or like vendor solutions that we have in place that are supporting these capabilities, and where were we like struggling the most. So that gave us like a clear path of like easily identifying our top priorities and where we can make significant impact given limited resources and bandwidth.
Got it. So I'm hearing that you had to prioritize a bunch of things, right? So one is you said that there were specific use cases that were top of mind. I'm sure you had some sort of a matrix as you were kind of prioritizing the use cases, but then also you had to make some architectural decisions, and you call it a collection of capabilities. Can you double click on that a little bit and talk about how you went about doing both of those things?
Yeah, I think it was speed to market was like super critical, right? So we were thinking about like, hey, what are the problems that we are like trying to solve, like speed to market. So if marketing cannot like act quickly, the stack fails like its purpose. Governance was like super critical to us. Different campaigns, like different cohorts, like different experiences. That was like super experience to us. And we wanted to be like confident that the data was like accurate and the extensibility was like non-negotiable. So the way we went about it is like, today, if there is like a new campaign, if that campaign needs like a new data from like a source system or like warehouse, the whole end-to-end cycle was like taking like weeks, in some cases like months to get to an activation platform. So that's the first thing that we wanted to like fix. So this is where we started thinking about like, hey, what is the data that we need to like depend on our data warehouses, and what is the data that needs to be like in a truly event-driven fashion that we need to like leverage for activating some of the campaigns and personalization. So that was like one key decision that we did. The second one is again like we are pretty big on like the sales-led motion being like a B2B organization. So it's like super critical when like someone like hand raisers like reach out to us to be able to like get them in front of like the sales organization, like the XDRs, like as quickly as we can. And we just didn't want to give like the raw data that we know about them, but we want to enrich the data in real time. We want to add like other signals and intents that we know about those customers, so that the sales team has like a nuanced understanding of like where they are coming from, what is that we need to help the customers with. So those were like a couple areas that we worked on. And then we thought like, hey, while we are doing that, let's start focusing on like, what does the next like 3-4 years would look like, how to strengthen our foundations. So there we started like identifying like, what are like the core areas for like DocuSign, like what are the core services for like DocuSign, and is really a vendor solution like so critical to like support these like solutions, or are these the solutions that we need to like internally like invest and like support? So those are the three key things that we went about like building.
Got it. And thanks for sharing that, Harsha. That's super helpful. And as you were making those decisions, I'm sure, like, you know, you kind of went through, hey, do we build this? Do we buy this? Do we kind of stitch everything together, right? And you know, obviously, DocuSign is a Uniphore CDP customer today, right? So as you were kind of looking at the tech stack that existed, and when you were looking at the Uniphore CDP, one, how important was the CDP as you were making some of these decisions? And then what are the things that were top of mind from a capability standpoint that you were saying, hey, I need this in order to make sure that I am good for the next 3-5 years?
Yeah. A few things like quickly stood out. One, our B2B data is much more complex than a B2C, just given like the number of dimensions around like the customers and accounts and prospects, users, etc. So we knew that like our data model is going to be like pretty unique to like DocuSign. So we did not want to like have like a very design a data model in such a way that it's very much centric to just the platform. So we know that our data model is going to be our data model, and it's going to be like extending like over time. It's going to get complex over time. So how do we go about like having like a CDP solution that can easily adapt to like our data model? So this is where all the composable architecture like comes into place, where the CDP can adapt to like our data, can adapt to like our data model at the same time to be able to support like any real-time signals that are not in the part of like the traditional warehouse like ecosystem. So that I would say was like the big part of it. And then along the way, we started like optimizing for like some metrics, right? So speed to market, like how long does it take for us to like activate like a customer? Is it like days, weeks, or can we do that in an hours when we have that information? And how can we better personalize their like journeys, like nurtures along the way? So as and when we are getting like better signals and like intent or information about those customers. So
got it. So that composability component that you talked about, I think that's key, right? Donald also mentioned it as he was going through his section. What was the impact like, or when you looked at the old way of doing things in the older stack to now the new way with the composable CDP? I mean, maybe a quick tidbit on like, what was that impact?
It was a pretty significant like impact. I would say like a few things that like were improved is with composables like CDP, like we were less worried about like moving our data from like point A to like point B. So there were times in the past like where we were moving data from our email services like platform. We were moving data from like our CRM system like Salesforce. We were moving data from like our ABM platform like demand-based like to like a CDP platform. And we were like building like additional layer of like logic like within the CDP, like how do we connect all of this data together? That was what was like taking up a lot of like engineering bandwidth at the time. Yet the data quality was like really poor. So a quick example is something as simple as like job titles, which exist in like 5 different systems. So we had like job titles unconsolidated sent to like CDP, and we were expecting marketers to like make their best decision on like which one to choose for like which use cases. The composable architecture, and then for us to like, and after us doing like some foundational work on our data platforms, that was no longer a case. Like our data was not leaving our ecosystem. We had our data warehouses where we had like kind of like source of truth for like a lot of like data attributes, right? So we were using that as a source of truth, and we were complementing that with like any other real-time signals that we were like gathering, or like any other data sources that were like updating like much more frequently. So that's how the whole composability like helped, like in a lot of ways. So our data is not stale, like it's not 24, 48 hours old, like stale. We don't have to worry about like stitching together the data in a way that like we are losing the data quality and like the governance becomes a nightmare. So yeah, those were the 2 main key things. And obviously like activating the customer like as quickly as we can.
So as you kind of went through this, I'm sure there were challenges, right? There were certain things when you were thinking about implementing the architecture, getting the teams aligned, potentially communicating that. I'm pretty sure there were some challenges that came through. Maybe what were your top 3 and how did you approach it?
I think the technical challenges were like pretty much very expected. So there were instances where we were migrating off of like some legacy systems. We were building like some real-time data pipelines, which never existed. I think that part was like expected and we were prepared for it. But the harder part was like kind of, I would say like organizational. So we had like data that is owned by marketing, which owned by product, and some owned by like engineering. We all had to like take like the joint ownership of that customer data. Historically, like the way the teams thought about it, it was like either it's not my problem or all of it is my problem. So I think getting that alignment to see that like, hey, it's the data, it needs to be like a shared a problem, and to get that alignment took us like a lot of like comms, like defining like clear success metrics, and also more importantly, like showing like quick wins to see why this all matters. So I would say those were some of the challenges that we
had. You kind of touched upon the cross-functional ownership piece, right? Like being like, hey, how do we, so from a champion standpoint, I know you quarterbacked all of it, if not most of it. But from a organizational design standpoint, like how did you think about the operating model, right? Because that's a very complex problem a lot of our customers also face. How did you think about that operating model of, hey, here is the new operating model, here is how we should be organizing ourselves to be able to like tackle both on the architecture side, ownership side, use case side, speed side, governance side?
Yeah. I wouldn't say we really cracked the code there, but I think we've gotten a lot better since we've started. So we aligned on like some common principles, right? Hey, a few things, like as an example is like we can't use like one data set for like activating campaigns and like a completely different like data set for like reporting on the performance of those campaigns, like things like that. So when we started like discussing that with the teams, like we came up with like some common understanding of like, yep, this makes sense. In order for this to make sense, we agreed upon like the data needs to be like centralized and democratized, and that's the data that needs to be like leveraged across like different teams, right? So those are some of the core principles that we had to like agree upon. And the two is like what we realized is moving the data from like point A to like point B is always like challenging. It comes up with like operational challenges, and the definitions like don't match for the most. So that's became like another area that we had to like tackle to get like the teams like work as much as possible in like one single source of truth. It was not easy, and it's still an ongoing journey, but like those were the two things that like immensely helped.
Yeah, and as you were kind of going through this, like, you know, when you're making those architectural decisions as well as like aligning on some of the use cases and stuff like that, you know, we hear a lot from some of our customers on, hey, I've got various tools in my toolkit to be able to accomplish it. What's the right way? What's the right mix? Now, one thing that we get asked quite a lot, and I definitely have a point of view there, but rather than share my point of view, would love to kind of get your take, is when you think about customer data platforms or CDPs, and then you think about these systems or tools that help you move data from point A to point B, or think like a ETL or reverse ETL systems.
Right.
How do they kind of coexist in this modern data stack that you are envisioning, but also like, what is like a good balance between the two? Or is there, you know, does one overlap with the other? Is one required, the other not?
If we are just looking them as like a CDP functionality and to your point, like an ETL / like reverse ETL tool, I don't think there is like much overlap there. For us, like CDP is about like, hey, how do we like unify, govern, and activate like customer data across like channels. That's like what like CDP does. And the ETLs are like reverse ETLs would be like, how do we like operationalize the data into the tools where teams are actually like working. So for example, like we have like tons of data within like our data warehouse, like Snowflake. How do we like get this data from the warehouse to like platforms such as like Salesforce, like platforms such as like Demandbase for ABM, or like Iterable for like email activation? And I'm talking about like the account data, the user profile data, etc. So that's where reverse ETL tools are like helping. But for like the marketers, when they want to like start like creating campaigns and activating campaigns, they still need like a solid like ecosystem such as CDP, where they're able to set up campaigns, like activate campaigns and make changes to like the customer journeys, etc. That still happens in CDP, and I don't think that's a function of like an ETL or an RETL tool. So for us, like, yeah, like we have like a very clear definitions on what CDP should be doing versus like what other such tools such as RETL tools should be doing. And there is space for both in the tech stack, to be honest.
Yeah, and thanks for that. I couldn't have described it any better, but if I was to just summarize and play that back a little bit, you still need a CDP for the marketer to use. And when you're using ETL, reverse ETL, it's primarily making the data available at the app layer most of the time. And it kind of becomes a little bit of a connecting tissue. But you have some of that capability with the CDP, but there could be other places where, you know, in the Martech stack, you need both of them to work in unison. So thanks for that point of view. Just thinking about like where you guys are headed from here on, right? So As you're thinking about, you solved for some of these problems that you saw or gaps that you saw at DocuSign. How are you thinking about AI, leveraging AI? And more importantly, as you're thinking about leveraging AI for the business, I'm sure top of mind is how do I architecturally approach it, right? So how are you thinking about, one, the usage of AI within marketing, but two, how are you thinking about it from an architecture design principle standpoint?
Yeah. So first of all, I think AI readiness was not an afterthought. So it is a design principle. That said, I wouldn't say like we've cracked it. We are still exploring, doing like tons of like POCs and figuring out like where AI can add like most value. But the last thing we want to do is like deliver like fragmented like experiences just because we want to do something with like AI. The whole AI workflows and functionality like should be embedded within like the core workflows of like what we do as a business like today, and that's what we are trying to figure out. But I think the key was making sure the architecture wouldn't be a blocker at that point, right? So that meant like focusing on like the data quality, governance, like frameworks, like real-time activations, and by doing that, when something promising comes out of like a proof of concept, like we can easily scale it instead of like getting stuck on like a pilot mode. So that's kind of like how we are like thinking. So TLDR, we are still in exploration mode, tons of POCs, but the architecture to be able to like scale when a specific like POC becomes like successful, I think that's where we are doing a lot of work at the moment.
And so as you're thinking about getting ready, making data AI ready, platforms data AI ready, architectural decisions that will help you scale, like you said, and extensible, what's like, if you had a magic wand, what's one problem that you want to solve for like tomorrow?
Internally, I would say like with productivity, I would say like for a good example, I think we've heard from Donald too. One thing that stood out is there are times where it takes like weeks from ideation to like activating like a campaign, right? So from the time when the marketer comes up with an idea to the time when the campaign actually goes out, it takes about like 6 to like 8 weeks. And we started looking at it like, why is it taking like 6 to 8 weeks? It's because like different teams are working in their different siloed like processes, like writing like campaign briefs, like doing all the manual QA checks and the localizations and the translations, like all of this. And I think this is like a huge area of like an opportunity, like where like AI and agentic workflows can like significantly like compact the time weeks to like days. So that's an area where we are looking to like right now explore like how AI can like play a role there.
All I can say, I hear you loud and clear, Harsha. So we'll definitely have more conversations around that aspect. But as you're thinking about the market shifts, the Martech stack, the future, are there specific trends or are there specific capabilities that you are envisioning that you will have to see within your tech stack and you will have to support? One thing that I see very often is no one's asking for more dashboards, right? They're asking for more intelligence. Yeah. And so are you seeing something similar? What are some other additional things? I mean, also beyond what Donald covered, are there specific things that you're in your current role observing and like, hey, I need to be preparing for this? Yeah. And it could be a compliance thing too, right? But yeah, what are those?
I think first, from what I've been seeing, in my opinion, there's going to be like a convergence of like Martech with like intelligence analytics. Like we have marketers that are like creating audiences. A lot of time there's like a lot of overlap with the campaigns and whatnot. And there's always a question of like, like we have the data, like why isn't like there are any intelligent alerts? Like why isn't there like any intelligent like insights to like warn us like this is not like the right strategy, this is not like the right audience building strategy, or like we are not optimizing for like X, Y, and Z like metrics. I think like those would be like converging like pretty soon, like co-piloting like the marketers to build like better campaigns, which will result in like better outcomes. The second, I think like it's the whole concept of like the zero copy architectures and data federation. So reducing like duplicates while keeping governance like intact. And the third one would be the agentic workflows that go beyond reporting to like actually like planning and like predicting and to be able to like act upon those predictions. So I think like those will be the shifts that we will see in the Martech stack, and not just at like one capability of the stack, but across like several different capabilities all the way from like data activation and like reporting. So I think the goal is to like to be able to give like connected experiences.
Makes sense. And you know, what you described is also very similar to some of the conversations I've had with, you know, organizations that work with us and organizations that want to work with us. So I'm glad to kind of hear that there is a lot of like overlap in how you've described it. But I wanted to kind of just kind of say that, hey, Harsha, thanks for describing exactly like, you know, a lot of the very practical things that you had to go through in your role. You know, kind of saying that really you can't build on monolithic architectural principles anymore, right? You have to have composable stacks. AI is not like something that's a bolt-on, if you will, and an afterthought, but it has to be a design principle from the get-go. It's embedded in those design principles that you shared. It's a shared priority, right? And it's not just within marketing, but within your organization, engineering. I'm sure there are other business units that will have it say. It's true transformation and not just modernization anymore as well. Would love to get your last question, but last take on, you know, as you were kind of going through it, it reminded me of an old article that I read a while back where it talks about system of records, system of transactions. And what I heard you say was, hey, we need to move from, not move, but basically evolve from those aspects to more of like a system of intelligence that kind of helps, you know, translate all of the data context into things that can help me plan, predict, act. And it should be across all the stack, right? And so curious to see if one, you or DocuSign have started to go beyond the experimentation into like, you know, rolling something out in that context.
We are actually like been trying really hard to like get like some proof of concepts to see like, hey, this sounds like a great idea, but like how does this work in like reality? The use cases that we have like picked are around like the audience creations, like actually, right? So different marketers come up with like different campaigns and they have like different like audience like requirements, and most of the times or sometimes they like overlap with like each other's. Like how do we like prioritize like which audience strategy is like better than the other based on the objective of that campaigns, based on like what goal that email or like specific comms is like trying to like accomplish. So I would say we are very super early on in the journey, but one thing that would help is like maybe not like to be able to like taking an action from an agentic standpoint, but at least to be intelligently to be able to like provide like objective insights to the at the planning stage itself, that like, hey, like your audience like overlaps with like 5 or 6 other campaigns and audiences, and here is what like our recommendation should be, either to like move forward with it or not move forward with it, or to like move to like a different audience strategy. So that's kind of like what we are experimenting at the moment.
Got it. So you're basically not just architecting for today's campaigns that are running, but you're primarily looking at intelligence for future during
future campaigns. Yeah, exactly. Right. So because like if we are trying to solve for like the campaigns that are running right now, I think we're already too late to that. So if we were able to gather the prediction and insights at the stage of like the planning, I think there's like a huge benefit and advantage. So which is what we are,
Well, Well, thank you so much for sharing all those thoughts and answering all my questions. But let me invite Donald back into our conversation. Donald, over to you. And I'm not sure if you had specific questions, but over to you.
That was such a great conversation. Just so good. And every time I thought I had a question, you answered it. So it's really, really excellent. Just I know the audience will get a lot out of it. But I do have some questions. And one of the key things I'm thinking about is not just the technical side of this, but how do you manage the stakeholder buy-in with these changes? And I'd love to hear from Harsha about that. That change management is such an important part of this process. How do you manage that stakeholder buy-in to make sure everyone's aligned behind this?
Yeah, it's never comes easy, and I think the more objective we get, like the more quick wins and the value like we showcase, it'll get easier over time or get better over time. And I think like I was talking as an example, we were talking about like productivity changes, like a campaign from ideation to launch, like takes about like 6, 7, 8 weeks. And what would like really help here, identifying like where are we like spending like more time, like so these are like, for example, we were spending more times with like language translations and like localizations to convert from English to like different like global languages. And all of this is like being done as like a business process, like ticketing systems, like where a human is like manually like reviewing the content and like localizing them, etc. So these are the areas where like an AI can actually like not like 100% solve the problem, but at least it can be like a co-pilot to them. Like it can like boost their productivity by at least like 50 or like 60%, where they don't have to like write the content from like ground up. All they have to do is like maybe like proofread. So to be able to like showcase like, hey, these are the areas that specifically we like to solve, and you might have to like adapt to like a slightly different business process as a result, but like the productivity gains here would be like significant, where your marketers or your teams will be able to spend like this 50% of the time on like strategizing for like better campaigns and things like that. So to be able to like objectively like share like what it means to them, and then to be actually able to like showcase them like the value and the quick wins is what like builds trust like over time. So yeah.
So you really have to show the value.
Show the value. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But that's great advice. Joe and Harsha, we're actually coming up to the top of the hour, but I think I want to make sure to see if there's any audience questions. Andrew, anything from the audience that we could be able to answer?
Yeah, we do have a couple audience questions. First, let me say thank you all for that great discussion, and thank you to the audience members that asked some questions. Let me pull this one up here first. And Harsha, maybe we'll start with you, but Donald and Joe, if you have something to add, please go right ahead. This question is, what kind of talent profiles are critical for a composable AI-ready MAR stack that might differ from traditional Martech teams?
Yeah, I can take that one. I would say like a lot of like what we've been doing here is a lot of like partnerships with like our data like and AI teams. Like in the past, like we definitely did not have like a need where we had to like go work with like an AI engineers or like an AI strategist from like our data organizations. And more as like we are looking at like agentic workflows in AI, we are looking at like different LLMs and like RAGs. So I think I don't necessarily know if it's going to be like a talent profile that like the Martech has to like build, but at least like I'm guessing like a lot of companies and organizations already have like an AI centric like teams are like orgs where we can like go partner with them. So I think in that sense, I would say like a lot more partnership with like the existing AI and like the data teams. But we so far did not find like a pressing need, like where we had to like completely like shift our like talent profile in at least within like Martech. We still have the same set of like engineers with like the same talent profile. Joe, if you have like thoughts.
I was just going to add, and that's the beauty of the approach and the architecture kind of solves for hey, let's align on the architecture, but also like make sure we deliver on the value part of it, where the change management is like almost like not minimal to almost not non-existent, because you have your teams that are currently supporting, you work with those teams, you keep your data where it is. If anything, it actually reduces the overhead of like making sure you're running your monitoring and doing data integrity checks and data quality checks in 2 different places or 3 different places, right? In the traditional approach. So in many ways, couldn't agree with Harsha more, right? You have your data operations team, the data engineering team that exists, and you will work with them, and they define what goes into the warehouse, what goes into the centralized place where you're unifying all of that data, and your composable stack sits on top of that. And all the integrations that already exist in that composable stack already takes care of a lot of complexities for you. And so you're not necessarily looking for any new set of folks to be able to support composability, but at the same time, you're moving faster. You're moving with more agility, and you're moving with a lot of flexibility on where you want data to live, where you want compute to happen.
I think all I would add to that is that I've seen exactly this happening, but I have seen data engineers sometimes become so involved with the Martech team that they effectively become part of the Martech team themselves. And I haven't yet seen a Martech team hiring for a data engineer, but I do see that sort of the existing data engineering team, somebody will get seconded to, you're now a virtual part of the Martech team. And it's not a hiring in for those skills, but it's very much that aligning with those skills. I think that's very important. And of course, the more successful they are, the more they get aligned with the Martech team. Great. Pretty close to the top. Anything else, Andrew, we could squeeze in quickly?
I think that's all the time that we have, unfortunately, for today. But please allow me to thank all of our speakers. We did hear from Donald with TDWI, Joe from Uniphore, and Harsha from DocuSign. We'd also like to thank Uniphore for sponsoring today's webinar. Please remember, we recorded today's webinar. We'll be emailing you a link to an archived version of the presentation. And if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, you can locate the resource window to download the PDF. And finally, for those unfamiliar, TDWI hosts in-person educational events. Our next one is in Orlando, taking place November 16th through the 21st. 16th through the 21st, pardon me. Please check your post-webinar communications for a unique discount code and a link to further details, as you are all getting $100 off any event package for attending today's session. And from all of us here, let me say thank you so much for attending. This does conclude today's event.